How many different types of adverb are there in English? And how can we classify them and categorize them to break them down and make them more manageable for us to use in speaking and writing? Welcome to the Word of Mouth English Studio channel, where we discuss all things grammar, accuracy, and help you with your speaking and writing strategies. In today's video training session, we'll be taking you through a comprehensive list of the different qualities associated with adverbs and all their different characteristics in terms of their classification, their form and function, and their usage. We'll be looking at a variety of examples in context for you to see how they're utilized so that you can start making use of them in your own English and not be hesitant to use them. If you recall, one of our previous videos talked about how to go about using adverbs of modification or modifying adverbs to be used with other parts of speech. In today's lesson, we'll go through all of the others. So let's get started. Today we'll talk about adverb types, what they are, giving examples, how we use them, and giving you additional tips. So what are adverbs? We know they're incredibly useful words that give us details about our whereabouts, about how something happened, about the position of something, or about the location of where it happened. Okay, so it gives us a variety of details. Okay, so it can be difficult to learn all the rules because they don't all have the same appearance and they can be placed in different places within a sentence. Do adverbs only modify? Is that their only job? Absolutely not. Adverbs can modify verbs, but also adjectives and other adverbs, as we'd seen in our last video. We have adverbs of manner that modify verbs, so we can walk slowly, we can walk quickly, or we can walk clumsily. Okay, so those are adverbs of manner that modify verbs, but for instance, adverbs of degree are different because when we say someone's extremely clever, we're not defining how they do something, but rather what type of person they are. Some adverbs modify other adverbs as well, as we saw in our last video, such as this is done in a, very easy way. If you want to use the adjective easy, but you can do it fairly easily, is the adverb of modification that modifies another type of adverb. So you can even have adverbs modifying adverbs, as we said in our last video. Do all adverbs end in ly? No, not all modification adverbs end in ly, as we saw in our last video. Okay, slowly and easily do have ly endings, but these are not the only types of adverb we'll see discussed today. We also have words such as already. Okay, these don't have ly endings. Okay, the word later is another adverb that does not end in ly, as well as often and never. We'll talk about what types of adverb these are very shortly. So let's talk about the 5 main types of adverb. The first ones are adverbs of frequency that explain or define how often something happens. Okay, here are some examples with never and often to have a look at. You've probably used some of these before at pre-intermediate and lower intermediate levels, but as we start developing our skills, we also start developing the rate at which we use them, and of course, other adjectives and adverbs come along. So these are adverbs of degree. Now, those are the second type of adverb. The adverb of degree describes the level or percentage to which something happens, okay? The extent to which something happens, such as using words like completely and absolutely, okay? Right, so you've probably used them at lower intermediate level, but what type of adverbs are there as well besides these? We also have adverbs of manner that indicate how an action happens. Okay, whether it happens correctly, noisily, silently, or quickly, easily, So these are used with other verbs as well. But there are also another two type of adverb we'll be talking about. One is an adverb of place, which talks about the location or whereabouts of something, including adverbs such as there, here, upstairs, abroad, and northwards, or southwards, or downwards, okay, or anywhere. And here are some examples in context for you to use. You might have already experimented with a lot of these. And then we have what we call adverbs of time that talk about when something happened. Right, so soon, lately, next, then, tomorrow, now. Okay, and we use an assortment of verb forms along with time adverbials, so you've got to be careful what verbs to use them with, because they can't all be used with the same type of verb. I went to the park today. Today is typically used with the present continuous, like I'll be moving today, okay, but then we'll talk about the future when we talk about today in that case, or you can use it in the past simple. I went to the park today, okay, but we don't use the word today with the present simple. And we don't use the word today with other types of verb, but you can also use today with the present perfect. I've done a lot of work today, okay, so think about what tenses to use with them. In the case of lately, lately can only be used with the present perfect. In some rare cases, it can also be used with the past simple, but good native English speakers prefer to use it with the present perfect. Let's have a look at all these adverbs in detail. To start off with, let's go for adverbs of frequency. We usually learn these at A1 and A2 levels, and we usually put these adverbs in mid-position between the subject and the main verb, after the modal verb, or after the first auxiliary verb, or after the verb be, which is otherwise known as an auxiliary. Now, in more formal English, we put these frequency adverbs in front position, okay, at the beginning of a sentence, okay, and then we can invert the subject and the verb, okay. So this is an example of B1-C1 and C2 inversion, we call it, where the subject and verb are reversed. Okay, so seldom had I seen so many people out on the streets is more advanced and proficient, because we start off the sentence with these types of adverb, whereas in neutral English, that means everyday English or, non-formal English, we don't typically use these at the beginning of a sentence, but rather after the main verb. I had seldom seen, okay, or I seldom seen see so many people out on the streets. So just before the main verb or just after the auxiliary in this case, right? So think about how you have used them before. Which of these two styles are you accustomed to using, and which ones would you like to start using more often? Remember, adverbs of frequency give details about how things happen. They modify verbs, and their usual sentence position is between the subject and the main verb in the sentence. So, subject, main verb. Okay, subject, main verb. If you do use them with in interrogatives with WH words, then they would often come, okay, after the WH word, okay? So think about how you'd use them. Now we move on to talking about adverbs of degree. Now, adverbs of degree are a different classification of adverb. They tell us about how strong, how powerful something is. So here they describe intensity, and they're usually placed before the adjective or before the adverb or verb that they modify, although there could be some exceptions, so watch out if you're a B2, C1 and C2 English user. So expressions such as absolutely or remarkably, utterly, rather, totally, almost. Some are more formal than others. Some are more usually used in academic writing, whereas others can be used both in speaking and writing semi-formally. Okay, you might have seen lots or lots of, right? So you might have used this before. This is informal. It is colloquial. It is not to be used in formal or academic styles. Terribly, on the other hand, is also, I would say, informal. I wouldn't say, the film was terribly good. I wouldn't use it in semi-formal and formal styles. So think about how you would utilize these adverbs. Remember that adverbs of degree tell us the extent to which something happens, or the degree at which it happens, and they can modify verbs, adjectives, and adverbs. All of these things. They fall into two groups. Adverbs that make meaning stronger or that strengthen a meaning, such as totally, absolutely, and adverbs that have a weaker effect on the verb. It was on the adjective. It was quite popular. It was fairly popular, but it's not as strong. Okay. Adverbs of this group appear in mid-sentence position before the verb, before the adverb, or before an adjective, as we said earlier. And you need to consider if the adjective is gradable or ungradable before choosing your adverb of degree. A gradable adjective, such as the adjective hot, can be modified with a very hot pan or a really hot pan, but it can't be modified with words like absolutely. We can't say it's absolutely hot. Okay, we can say it's terribly hot, but we can't use the word absolutely. So you can say I'm absolutely boiling, but that's because the word boiling is ungradable. So always learn the difference between gradable and non-gradable adjectives before deciding which adverb of degree to use. If you'd like to make a verb stronger or intensify it, okay, such as, imagine you've got a verb such as love, for instance. Use the adverb really. I really love this series, but not very. We wouldn't say I very love it. Of course, we could say I love it a lot, okay, or I like it very much. But the position of very and really in a sentence is strikingly different. You can say I really like watching films on TV, but as we said, not I very like. You already know this if you're a B1 intermediate user, but here are some examples of how we can use adverbs of degree. I completely understand the problem. This is totally ridiculous. Are you absolutely sure you sent that email yesterday? I'm not very happy with my new phone. And she reads books incredibly quickly. Adverbs of degree can modify other adverbs. These are some of the adverbs that we looked at in our last video. Adverbs such as very or extremely can be put before another verb, and what they do is they strengthen the meaning of that verb. So, I very rarely go to the cinema, okay, strengthens the word rarely. How rarely do you go to the cinema? Quite rarely or very rarely. So in that case, we'd use an adverb of degree together with an adverb of time for that effect. When talking about adverbs of manner tell us about the way something happens or the way in which it's done. So this is a different classification of adverb. How did he do it? In other words, describe the way in which the action was done. Did he do it quickly? Did the company spend greedily? Did they look forward to the interview anxiously? Did they do it professionally? Did they do it beautifully or expertly, which is even stronger? Did they do it cautiously? Okay, so how careful were they? Etc. So think about which of these adverbs you have used with verbs. Adverbs of manner are used with verbs because they give information about how the action is performed. And they almost always end in ly. That's something that you can be more confident about. Adverbs of manner can describe how quickly or loudly something is done, and these adverbs are usually positioned after the verb. And they're generally formed by adding ly to an already existing adjective. So do consider your spelling strategies. You will have to make some modifications to your writing. So adjectives ending in y, for instance, become ILY endings. So I find it easy becomes this is easily done, or I can do it quite easily. Adjectives, on the other hand, that end in FUL will change to fully. So to do something in a beautiful manner, or something is beautiful, when something is beautiful, you can say, I have done it beautifully. She's performed beautifully. Okay, he writes beautifully. There are a few adverbs of manner, however, that do not always end in ly. And we discussed these in our last video as well. Those are called irregular adverbs, and here are some examples. She worked hard, but not she worked hardly. Okay, so that is another example, and fast is another irregular adverb that cannot be used with ly. However, I ate my lunch slowly, easily and correctly are used with ly endings. Now we move on to discussing how to use the adverb of place. Adverbs of place tell us about where something happens or where something can be located. They usually go in the end position, and that's how they are typically classified or recognized. Okay. Can you come over here? We'll be at that table there. Or they sometimes go in front position, in writing particularly. Here she sat. Outside there was a small pond. You'll notice that speaking and writing strategies are often very different when it comes to using parts of speech. In particular, when we use discourse markers, we don't always use them in the same position to indicate the same thing in the same style. So using these adverbs in different positions in a sentence will alter your meaning or will change your intended meaning. Adverbs of place describe where actions happen. These types of adverbs modify verbs, not other adjectives or adverbs or clauses. In a sentence, an adverb of place occurs after the main verb or after the object. And these are examples of adverbs of place that we looked at earlier. She ran upstairs. Our path took us northwards. Where are my keys? I put them here. When it rained, we had to go indoors. Or she couldn't find her purse anywhere. Here we are looking at colloquial examples of how to use place adverbs toward the end of a sentence. And finally, we move on to the fifth type of adverb classification, and that's adverbs of time, which usually tell us about when something happens. So, when will you do it? When was it done? At which point in your presentation will you be referring to this particular discussion or area? Okay. At the end of this presentation, I will talk about this. Okay. Today, I haven't seen Matthew. I haven't seen Matthew yet. I've finally received that letter. So, how do we use them in context? First of all, they can describe fixed points in time. That's important to remember. Like today and tomorrow are fixed time references. So it can describe the frequency of an action or how often you perform this action. For instance, I send out brochures hourly. I take calls hourly. Okay, so they can be used with comparisons of time if you want to compare something to something else, such as the words recently and earlier when making comparisons. Adverbs of time usually occur after the main verb, as you can see in these examples. After the main verb and after the main verb. Okay, so how many of these adverbs of time have you used in your speaking or writing? You might be accustomed to using quite a few of these already, but how comfortable are you using the styles? Well, these are fairly simple at B1 and B2 levels. Okay, they would be more difficult, say, for the lower levels. However, remember that there are also other types of adverbs, and those 5 classifications of adverbs are not the only types of classification. There are indeed more. Let's just take a sneak peek at what they are, okay, just to give you a glimpse into how to use other adverbs, such as perhaps focus adverbs. Focus adverbs draw attention to a particular part of your clause, and they point to a verb phrase, but they also draw attention to noun phrases or prepositions or adjectives and adverbial phrases. In other words, you've got to be quite well versed with your use of collocations. Collocation, collocation, collocation. That's what we say. When we speak, we often emphasize a particular part of a sentence with stressed intonation. So with this kind of intonation, okay, right, you can say this sentence without using any adverb. I know Tom is coming to the party. Now, Tom is your point of reference. You're stressing that Tom is one of the people who'll be coming. I know Tom's coming, but what about the others? Right, so using a focus adverb to say this sentence in other words, you could say, I know that at least Tom is coming to the party. And here you'd stress the word at least together with the word Tom, but not just the word Tom. So when using focus adverbs, intonation matters. Okay, it's represented by using italics. Okay, when we talk about stress, we represent stress in terms of italics when we're writing. But what about speaking? If you're giving a presentation, which verbs or words or adverbs should we stress? They're usually the most important words in a phrase. So writing and speaking will be simplified, and ambiguity will be reduced if you use focus adverbs instead of generic phrases. Think about how you could use them. There are also what we call linking adverbs, which are generally known as linking words. Okay, now they include adverbs such as however, therefore, nevertheless, and moreover, which a lot of our learners learn at B2 upper intermediate levels. Now, these adverbs usually link to clauses in a sentence. Okay, so they're used in the middle here, but you can also use however at the beginning of a sentence, and it still links two clauses together. I have read a lot about ancient history, however, I'm not an expert on the subject. Or you could use another linking word at the beginning of your sentence to indicate comparison or contrast, such as although. Although I'm not an expert on the subject, I have read a lot about ancient history. Therefore is another linking adverb that is usually placed in the middle of your sentence, but can also be placed at the beginning of a sentence. I really want to pass my exam. Therefore, I need to work very hard. This is a bit more polished, a little more pristine, a little more technical, this adverb, if you want to use it. It's not to be used with everyday colloquial English, perhaps, with friends or colleagues, but we would use them more in formal writing and speaking. Right, so we then move on to adverbs of certainty. Adverbs of certainty express how sure the speaker is about something. Now, this is interesting. It includes adverbs like probably, certainly, and definitely. Let's have some examples. It will probably rain tomorrow. How certain is the speaker that it will rain? Well, not completely, not 100%, but quite. More than quite, actually. There's quite a high probability. So this is quite high, okay, close to complete certainty, but not entirely complete. So instead of, committing yourself to complete definition or complete assertion of something, then you can use probably if you're not 100% certain. I definitely prefer teaching to working in an office, so definitely here is a very strong type of adverb, and look at its position after the subject and before the main verb in a sentence. Remember that adverbs can modify sentences. Adverbs can modify entire clauses or entire parts of a sentence. This is something we mentioned in our last video on modifying adverbs. You might want to refer back to that video after this one. Now, these sentence adverbs include adverbs such as fortunately, generally, and interestingly. This adverb usually appears at the beginning of a sentence and expresses a general feeling about something, about the idea of the main clause, not just of a word, but of the main idea of the sentence. So, generally, I prefer traveling by train would be, the word generally here would be classified as an adverb that modifies a whole clause. Fortunately, I brought my umbrella because it's raining. So fortunately here would be the adverb that modifies the sentence. Or fortunately, everyone arrived in time for the school trip. Again, think about punctuation. Here we can see that the use of the comma is usually employed after the adverb that modifies a sentence. And how do we use them? Well, the position of an adverb depends on the type of adverb. For instance, adverbs that modify verbs usually come or appear after the verb or after the object itself. We usually start the sentence off with a subject, followed by our main verb, and then followed by the adverb of manner, such as in the sentence, he runs fast, not fastly. Thank you very much for joining us in today's video lesson on adverbs. You now have a clear way of using them, and you can use them accurately in your speaking and writing to indicate a variety of things and to be more articulate. Thanks for watching today's video. If you like the content, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel to learn more tips and tricks that can help you with your speaking and writing techniques. And see you next time.